Welcome to part 2, and this one is a simple scenario where we are going to create a CloudFlare worker that is going to act as a little proxy to a weather service. Now what that really means is that our front-end application could be anything. It could be a web app, it could be Flow, it could be anything it likes. That's going to make a call into our CloudFlare worker, and what it's going to do then is it's going to then make a call out itself to a third-party service. Now in this example we are going to use a weather API. It's going to get hold of that data, it's going to return it back via the CloudFlare worker, and it's going to pass it on to our front-end application from this API call. Now the great thing about it is that API key can sit nice and safe on the server, not exposed to the outside world. So this is a very, very common scenario for you sort of project builders out there who are building kind of front-end applications, but you want a little bit of back-end integration to be included, but it also keeps those secrets safe as well. So this is just one scenario, but of course, when you're up and running, then you'll be able to use CloudFlare Workers to probably cover many, many different scenarios for your own projects. It could be that you want to call out to Supabase, kind of do some work on some data, and then return that back to your front-end application, all being handled server-side as well. So enough of the waffle. Please do like the video. I'd really, really appreciate that if you enjoy my content. Of course, please do subscribe to the channel as well. So let's get into the video and let's get cracking. Now, it's highly likely when you are building your front-end applications that you are going to want to integrate your application with a third-party API. Now, this could be something like ChatGPT or another service like this particular one on screen, which is a weather API. Now, with these type of services, you would have a private API key which you can use in order to call out to this particular service. It's kind of a way in which you can associate your account with the using of this particular service. Now, if I just look at the dashboard here, if I just move forward here, you can see here that this particular kind of weather API has this API key. Now, of course, if I was to kind of expose this to the outside world, then somebody else could kind of use that API key and they could be using that on their own websites, kind of utilizing either credits or additional costs, which I don't want them to do. But I would like to protect that particular API key. Now, if you were building a front-end application like a website, or you're building something in Flow or something like that, then it's not a good idea to store this API key in kind of memory or in state if you was using a Flow application. And then every time you are making a request, you'll be then kind of transferring this API key over every single request. So what we need to do is we need to find a way that we can protect ourselves from that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a CloudFlare worker which will protect this API key for me. So I'm going to kind of package up the API key with my CloudFlare worker. In fact, even more important, actually, what will happen is the API key will be stored server-side, that my CloudFlare worker will kind of use. It will kind of look up, grab that API key at runtime, and then use that for every request that it will make to the weather API. So what will happen is my front-end application will call in to the CloudFlare worker. It will then make a request to then this weather API. The results will be then returned via the CloudFlare worker, and then of course that would then be passed on to my front-end application. So this is a very, very common scenario that you likely will find yourself in. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this free service here, and I'm just going to create a CloudFlare worker which is going to kind of connect to this sort of one of the APIs that we have here to return me back some weather data for a particular location. Now, of course, if you were building something like for ChatGPT or something like that, and you would like to use their APIs, OpenAI, then you'll be doing something very similar. You'll be kind of like calling out to the Open API, sort of API endpoints. You'll be kind of getting your chat data back. That will come back via a CloudFlare worker and then will be passed on to your front-end application. And the great thing about this, because the API key is server-side, you are protecting yourselves along the way. So in the next bit, we're going to start using AI with Cursor to generate this particular kind of CloudFlare worker process. Okay, so here I am there back in Cursor. Let's do things in a slightly different way to how we did the introduction. So I'm just going to now go to my directory here, and I'm just going to create a brand new folder, and I'm going to call this one Weather Service Worker. Just hit enter. I'm going to go now back to here. I'm going to open that folder now in Cursor, go to my CloudFlare projects, go to documents here, and I'm just going to open this particular folder. Now it's an empty folder, nothing in it. And of course, I've got my workspace here. Let me just open up everything here. You can see here that I'm in my Weather Service Worker directory, got no files there on the left-hand side, and I've got my composer up here ready for me to now start kind of composing my first message. Okay, so then before we start prompting, let's give our composer some context around what we are going to be creating. So here I am on the Weather API website. I'm into the kind of the documentation here. I will be when I sort of hit the docs option here, just go there. And I'm now into this particular page, which kind of gives me a little bit more information about the endpoints here. So you can see I've got my real-time API just down here, my forecast API, which is the one that I'm going to be using. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I think I can probably just copy this particular link here. So copy link address there, and I'm going to now go back over now to Composer, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up here into the prompt. So I'm just going to type in @ and I'm going to go to docs and just hit enter there. Now I've already got some created here. I'm going to create a brand new document here, and I'm just going to paste that URL in here. You can see it's going to go straight to the API forecast here, but I think you could use the full documentation here. You don't need to do that particular sort of directly to this particular part of the documentation. So I'm just going to put enter there. It's going to add the docs, and I'm just going to keep it as Weather API. Just confirmed that, and I've now got that available to you. You can see that's now in my Composer window here. So anything I now prompt over that, I've gave the prompting some a little bit more, or at least Claude here, which is what we're using behind the scenes here as the language model, some context around what we are looking to create. Okay, so we're ready to go then with the prompt. I've said create a CloudFlare worker called Weather Service Worker. Now that could have been any particular name, but just matching that up with the folder, which uses the Weather API forecast endpoint to return weather details for a location. As my API key is included in the URL, please secure my API key. Please include a Cloudflare project configurations. I've been quite descriptive about kind of what I want it to actually do. So let's just hit enter. Let's hopefully see everything created for ourselves. And what I'll do is I'll walk through in just a moment what all of this code and these steps hopefully that will be created that we can then run through bit by bit. Okay, so that's all looking pretty good. I'm not going to worry about the detail just at this moment in time. I'm just going to hit the accept all, and then let's have a look up and see what it's created then. So you can see here that it's created the code. Now, again, I don't really need to go into the detail here. I'm just going to make an assumption here that this worker is going to kind of do everything that we need it to do. Let's just scroll down. We can see here that we've kind of got our worker kind of configuration file. This is going to be important for us. This needs to be associated with the project. And then here we've now got all of the necessary steps that we need in order to set up the dependencies, because we're going to need to install the dependencies because we're going to need to use the tooling to kind of get this deployed into Cloudflare Worker. And we've also got here some other essential parts, as I said at the beginning of the kind of the series introduction, where we do need to authenticate against Cloudflare itself. This bit here is quite interesting because this will allow us to persist our API key with inside the actual server platform itself. That's going to be important because we want to keep our secrets safe and in one particular location. And here, this is going to simply do the deployment for us. So I think what we can do is we can go through this step by step. Now, there is just one little adjustment that I'm going to make here, and that's this particular line here. Here it's got the little -G. Now, this is going to install Wrangler as a global dependency on my machine. Well, I don't really want that. I kind of want this to be a dependency of this particular project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go down here to the terminal. I'm just going to paste that in here, but I'm going to remove the -G off. Let's hit enter, and I'm hoping this will kind of execute and install all of the node modules. So there it goes, it's doing its thing. You can see here on the left hand side we've got a node modules folder created, and we're getting our package.json, our config files all created, and that is looking all good. Now what we can now do is we can do this here. I'm just going to hit the run for Wrangler login. Now this off screen is just going to now authenticate against that here. So I'm just going to open that here. In just a moment here, I'm going to accept that. I'm going to just hit the allow button, and it says successfully logged in here. And hopefully in just a moment, it will return me back to the command prompt. Excellent, that's brilliant. Now next up, we've got this Wrangler secret put weather API key. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this, and then it's going to then prompt me to then enter in that API key. So if I'm just going to hit run here. So here it's asking me for the secret value. So what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to grab my API key for Weather API, and I'm just going to kind of paste that in here. So just move up here, just going to copy that, go back, go here, just paste that in there like that, press enter. Now this is going to bring up this prompt now about it can't seem to find this worker called Weather Service Worker, and that's just because we haven't actually deployed this yet to Cloudflare. So I'm just going to say yes here because it's going to kind of create perhaps like a stub kind of project on the Cloudflare dashboard, and now that's all now been uploaded, and that secret is now safe within inside that project on Cloudflare. Okay, just wanted to take just a quick moment to explain to you a little bit about where these keys are now stored. So this is the CloudFlare dashboard. You can see here I've got my kind of almost like stub weather service worker project. Now I've not deployed this yet, but if I just click on it and then I move over to settings, you can see here I've got this variables and secrets section. You can see here this is the weather API key secret that I just created. Now what I can do is I can hit edit here, and you can see here that it's currently marked as secret, but I can't update it here. But you can do if you just choose do the drop down of type and change that to text. You can now come in here and you can then now update that value if you ever wanted to, and just hit the deploy option down here. Now we're not going to do that. We're going to keep that here as our secret for now, but I just wanted to explain that briefly, whereabouts that location was, just in case that you wanted to update it in the future. Okay, so the No Code Academy is very much about sort of no code, or certainly sort of low code. So of course, if you're not a coder, don't worry about it. But let's have a little quick walkthrough of the code that's being generated, because there's some bits here that's going to be quite important to pick out. So what's nice at the top here is that the weather API base URL has kind of been set. Now this is quite good because it's kind of pulled that context from the documentation that we actually provided. Here we're just kind of saying that anything other than the get request is not allowed. So we're just going to return back a 405 there. So that's good. So a little bit of protection that's added here. Here we're sort of building up a URL. The bits to point out here that it's looking for a location, so we're going to need to pass in a parameter called location in the actual URL itself, which is great. And here it's kind of supporting also as well that we can pass in the number of days. But the good thing is by default it's kind of set it to 3 days only, so we don't need to actually pass the days in if we don't need to. And of course, if this is the free version of the API, I'm not quite sure what restrictions that we've got, but so I'm just going to leave that as 3 days. Here it's just basically saying, look, if you don't provide a location, then we need to be able to provide some kind of error back to the user that the location parameter is required. So this is all quite nice bit of validation there. And this is kind of where we're building up the API, and we're going to call out to this API just down here, but it's kind of sort of appending everything we need. It's pulling out the environment, the weather API key. This is quite nice because we've not hard coded it into this particular file, but of course it's now part of the environment. You can see here it says weather API underscore key. This will match up to the secret that we just created. Here it's getting the location and the days, and here it's building out the URL, and it's kind of going to make that request in and then get that kind of response back. Now what it's really doing is really just kind of stringifying the data that comes back and then returning that back as a JSON document. So pretty well much what it says up here about it being a proxy, that's exactly what it's doing. So we're calling out into Cloudflare. Cloudflare is going to then make that request. It's going to get that response back, and then it's going to then be able to pass that back on to our application. Of course, if there's any errors, it's going to kind of catch them down here. So this is looking really, really good. This is looking like it will do everything that we need to do right off the bat. So in the next bit, we'll look at trying to run this up, and let's see if there's any particular problems that we encounter. Okay, so first up, we're not going to deploy this straight away. We're going to kind of run this up in dev mode, and let's kind of see what happens. So we need to type in here Wrangler dev like that. In fact, I need to spell Wrangler correct there. So let's just type in Wrangler dev. That's now going to load up for us. And here I can just open up the web browser. So let's head over to the actual browser, and let's just see if we can then pass in this request. Okay, so you can see that I brought up a brand new browser window, and I typed in localhost :8787, and it's now asking about the location parameter is required. Now what I can do is here, because this now conforms to the very similar to doing an API request with the weather API, I can do a question mark and I can type in location, and I'm just going to put in London here. Now I expect to see an error at this point. If I enter, it says the API key has been disabled. So it's a bit of a odd error, that, because you're kind of thinking, well, why is it? I haven't actually disabled it. And that is because we're running this in localhost. So somehow we've now got to tell our local project about this API key because we're running this locally. If I was to deploy this now to the production servers, everything would work okay. So how do we get that API key running locally? Well, let's head back over to Cursor and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so on my project on the left-hand side, I'm just going to create a brand new file. So I'm just going to hit this, and I'm going to call this one dot, and I'm going to say dev.vars like that. Just press enter. Now in here, I'm just going to paste in this. Now this is going to say whether API key equals your API key. So I'm just going to go and grab the API key. So now I've got my API key local. Now, one key thing to remember, if you are using something like Git or something like that, please do make sure that you exclude this file from being part of your GitHub project, because obviously that would then be publicly accessible. Now, you do not want to do that. So just make sure that you create a git ignore. Have a look on ChatGPT or anything like that on how to create a git ignore file. And then, of course, there's another file that you need to create on the left-hand side here. But for now, this just allows us then to have this Weather API key available during development. So I'm just going to hit save here like that. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we then just exit out of this, and we just need to kind of run that back up again, Wrangler dev, so it can pick up that file. Let's head back over to here. Okay, just hit refresh, and it's still not working, so something must be wrong. Let's have a quick look then. Let's see what's going on. It could be that there is a typo. So if I just look at my dev.vars, weather underscore API key, so I think we might have a bit of a typo. So if I look back in here, it's trying to pull out this as weather underscore, sorry, where is it? Here, weather underscore is not specified here. So I've made a bit of a typo there. So all I need to do is just put a little underscore like that, and we should be good. If I just hit save like that, it's going to reload. Let's just head back here. Let's just do a shift refresh. And there we go. It looks like we've got the API response coming back. If I just print this, now this is just like I think it's just an extension that I've got in Chrome, just allows me to kind of see the document in its kind of more structured format. So that's looking pretty good. It looks like we've got everything kind of working there. Now, of course, this is running locally because we've got that key kind of local, but we'll now deploy this now in the next bit, and we'll get this running pretty well much doing the same thing out in the public web. Okay, so back in Cursor then you can see that one of my last instructions here was a Wrangler deploy. So we just come over here and hit run, and away it goes. And I'm going to leave that to package up everything. It's going to upload it, and then it's going to hopefully return me back then a URL of my project, and then we can quickly give it another whirl. There it is. So I'm just going to take this here, just going to do a copy here actually, because I'm going to bring this into a different browser window. There it is. I can just hit enter here. Now I'm going to get this location parameter. It's not required, so I should just be able to do the same thing as I did before. Just type in location, type in London, hit enter. Okay, so I've got a problem, obviously, with the API key once more, because clearly I've obviously renamed it incorrectly, because I think it was actually weather API underscore key. So I need to go back to my application. Let's go and sort this out why we are here. So I'm just going to change this then to weather API key. I'm going to go over to my dev.vars. I'm just going to remove that underscore here and then just save out these files here. That is all good. Let's just do a quick deploy. There's nothing like a bit of live problem or troubleshooting. I should have got this really right in the first place, to be quite honest with you, but there we go. This shouldn't take 2 moments. There we go. Let's just pop back over here. Let's just hit refresh here. And there we go. We got everything all nicely working. Now this is now correctly working in production. So there we go then. Just to summarize then, we've used kind of AI in Cursor to create a CloudFlare worker. Now, of course, I could carry on iterating now, I could carry on asking this to do various other activities on this particular file. We've created the dev.vars for working locally. As I said, just make sure that you sort out your git ignore that you're going to need. But the great thing about it is that this makes it very, very easy for you to kind of have these cloud-based services up and running, which kind of secures your API key. And of course, you just want to change your API key, you can in the future. But of course, there's going to be other scenarios that we're going to have inside the Academy as well. This is just one very, very simple one to protect API keys, because that's something that I do get requested a lot from the community, and CloudFlare Workers is definitely one service that you can use to do exactly that in a really, really simple way. So hopefully you found this useful. So there you go. That is a wrap for part 2 in this little mini series where we looked at CloudFlare Workers. If you love the no code and the low code space, please do check out that link on the screen there. That's the Digital Pros and No Code Academy. But if not, and you enjoy YouTube, then please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you aren't already a subscriber, where I cover these kind of things on a weekly basis. And of course, I'll be doing so much more in the future as well in this particular area. So hopefully I'll see you then in the next video.